Hey everyone, this is Derrick Broze of the Conscious Resistance Network, and today we're going to talk about some of the news you might have missed this week. Since I'm not doing a live show and I'm out of town this weekend, I figured I'd just do a quick video to catch you guys up on some of the articles that I wrote this week. But before we do that, I want to remind you guys to bookmark theconsciousresistance.com, where you can get all of our latest content, including the articles we're about to go over, lots of videos, interviews, and of course you can subscribe to our email newsletter, which I will be sending out tomorrow morning. And also, I want to invite you guys to follow us on minds.com. Minds.com/ the Conscious Resistance Network is a great place to keep up with our content, to follow our work, to interact. And beyond that, I would also invite you guys to sign up for our text list, for our Discord channel, and any other way you can keep in touch with us so we can get to know each other, work together, collaborate, and keep building a better world together. Now, let's get right into it. This one just came out. Within the last day or two, geoengineering could reduce warming by half without hurting the planet. This is a new study claiming that controversial climate engineering techniques, which are geoengineering, also known as solar radiation management, also known as spraying aerosols out of the back of a plane. A new study is now claiming that with the right dose, scientists could reduce global warming by half without causing any major damage to the planet. And this study is being promoted by a longtime geoengineering advocate, David Keith, who many of you might be familiar with if you followed this subject for a while. Keith is a Harvard professor who's been pushing this idea for a long time, and the most recent study he's involved with was published in the Nature Climate Change Journal and written about in Scientific American and many other places. And the way they're promoting this now is after you've heard about all the negative aspects of geoengineering, if you've heard about all the potential negative consequences, now we've figured out the right dose. We just have to do it the right amount, and there will be no negative consequences. That's what we're being told now by David Keith and Peter Irvine, a climate and geoengineering researcher at Harvard University, who was also involved in the study. And as I said, Keith has been pushing for geoengineering for more than a decade. He's been one of the most vocal voices on this. He's been confronted a few different times by activists for ignoring the negative consequences. So basically what this study did is it used the same regions as the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change to look at how geoengineering might affect various regions. And this is all based on computer modeling because according to them, this is not taking place in the real world. There are no real world examples of geoengineering or climate engineering or weather modification. All of that is just a conspiracy theory. This is only being tested in computer labs and computer modeling. So anybody who tells you otherwise is a nutso conspiracy theorist. That's their assessment, at least. And they basically said that they looked at average and maximum temperatures, maximum annual precipitation, and total water availability, and found that no region was made worse by geoengineering. They claim that hurricanes, typhoons, and other storms would not be worsened and might actually offset some of the effects. But Scientific American even admits that the study is not a completely realistic depiction of potential solar geoengineering scenarios. And other scientists have spoke up. Climate policy researcher and faculty member from Arizona State University, Jane Flegel says they are desperately trying to conjure demand for their research topic, but I think they're hamstringing themselves over the long term by overclaiming. It's important to keep in mind that this study actually tells us very little about the feasibility of geoengineering. It's reasonable to ask whether we expect the real world to behave like these models. And even if the real world did behave like these models, it's not clear to me that we should expect this research will inform rational decision making. Then you also have Alan Robach, who is a climate and aerosols expert at Rutgers University, who's also worked for the IPCC. And he basically says the study does not take into account the reality that geoengineering will probably have additional side effects. Quote, I do not agree that no area will be significantly worse off under solar geoengineering, he said in an email. Worse compared to what? And you guys may remember this name if you followed my articles. This Alan Robach from Rutgers University, a couple years back, he actually gave a speech in 2015 at the American Association for the Advancement of Science in San Jose, California, where he said that he believed the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, was already using geoengineering as a weapon of war, and he claimed that he received a phone call from two men from the CIA asking him questions about weather engineering, and it led him to believe that these programs are already active. And many people excuse me, many people already believe this as well, and this is what is known as the chemtrails, the geoengineering conspiracy theory. So I think there's more reason than ever to suspect that these programs are taking place. And as some of us have predicted for some time, now they're just getting people acclimated to this idea and getting ready to announce that they're going to launch these programs in the real world. And it's going to look a lot like what people have been talking about for years, what people call chemtrails, and which I don't think is a term we should use. It's called geoengineering. These programs, more than likely, based on all available evidence, are already active and taking place, and the corporations and the governments involved in that are just keeping it quiet. So check out that article. This one here, just a reminder that there are wars going on all around us and that the United States is engaged in many conflicts in countries that most Americans can't even name. U.S. killed at least 14 civilians in a country most Americans don't know the U.S. is bombing. This is coming from a new report from Amnesty International, which shows that U.S. airstrikes from aircraft and drones have increased in Somalia, resulting in the deaths of at least 14 people. And that's just with what they can confirm. And the report from Amnesty International was titled The Hidden U.S. War in Somalia. I advise you guys to look at it, and it's actually kind of cool. They included a graphic novel version of the report because they basically said, we know people aren't going to read a 75-page report, so we turned it into a graphic novel to maybe help them understand what's taking place. The report shows that the U.S. military has tripled the annual rate of drone strikes in Somalia over the last 2 years since April 2017, and the number of strikes is higher than in Libya and Yemen combined in Somalia. Of course, the U.S. military claims that nobody has died, no civilians have died, it's only terrorists that they're killing. But Amnesty International says that their report is the result of interviews, satellite imagery analysis, and corroborating the information through a variety of open source investigation techniques, as well as speaking to local doctors. And the Department of Defense already responded to the report and claims that this is BS, we didn't kill anybody, yada, yada, yada. But the interesting thing is, Brian Kastner, who's part of Amnesty International, he recently appeared on Democracy Now! And he basically was discussing how AFRICOM, the African Command, the U.S. African Command, which is part of their military colonization of the entire continent of Africa, basically saying that there are, an increase in strikes. There are lies coming from AFRICOM where they're saying that they did a strike, and they just deny the fact that people are dying. It's similar to what we've seen in the past, where the U.S. military labels any military age men, that's like 17 and above, as militants. So even if you were a civilian who had nothing to do with the terrorist attack, if you're killed incidentally as collateral damage in some drone bombing, well, they just label you as a militant. You're not a civilian, you're not an innocent person, you're just a militant. Right, so what I write here, though, is what's important to remember is that the ruling class oligarchy and their friends in the corporate media, they do not want us to wake up and to resist the war machine because it's the biggest, it's one of the biggest drains on the environment, on the economy. All of your tax dollars are going to fund the war machine, and they know that if they can prevent the growth of a massive anti-war movement, or just get people to stop talking about it and pretend that it doesn't exist, then there will never be a real resistance to it. And so what we know is that just recently, AFRICOM Commander General Thomas Waldhauser told a congressional hearing that he wouldn't call what the U.S. is doing in Somalia a war. So they don't even want to use that language because they don't want people to realize that we're in a war. It's like we're already in the 1984 kind of double speak where war is peace because we're in a peacetime, right? We're not actually at war with anybody. We're in a conflict. We're in engagements. There's all these different euphemisms they use. But at the end of the day, American tax dollars are going to bomb and kill people in other countries. And it's important to recognize that. This is another story that I've been following. New documents reveal that local police are helping ICE spy on Americans. And this is coming from the American Civil Liberties Union of Northern California after a FOIA lawsuit against ICE trying to get them to release records related to their partnership with Vigilant Solutions. Vigilant Solutions is a company that's involved with selling access to a database that has millions and millions of license plate information on it. So local police want this, the federal government wants it, and now we know that ICE has partnered with Vigilant Solutions. We found that out last year, but now we found out more details where the local police are actually violating their own local laws and sometimes violating sanctuary city policies to collaborate with ICE with the freaking police state Stasi, um, who many people are embracing and celebrating because they think that they're fighting solely against illegal immigration, when at the end of the day, these agencies are becoming more militarized and more police state-like, and it's only going to affect us, the people, at the end of the day. They're coming for all of us eventually. So if you let them do these type of shady things, if you let the feds collaborate with the local cops, eventually it'll be used against you as well, not just against illegal immigrants and things like that. So I advise you to read this article to get a better understanding of what automatic license plate readers are, who Vigilant Solution is, and how ICE is collaborating with local police to spy on you. And then this one is really interesting because we just had the confirmation hearing for this guy, David Bernhardt. He is going to be, without a doubt, the new Interior Secretary. He's currently the nominee. I don't think he's been approved yet. But David Bernhardt is a former oil lobbyist, lawyer, and he's currently the acting Secretary of the Interior Department. But he will soon be the official Secretary of the Interior Department. And he is just surrounded by ethical complaints and conflicts of interest because, again, he worked for the oil industry. This is just the typical corporatist stuff that you guys have all seen before. We've seen it with Monsanto, we've seen it in other industry. The dude works in the oil industry, he's a lawyer for them, he defends them, then he gets put in a position of power where he can help them even further. And one of the pieces of information we have here is that Reveal, which is a journalistic outlet run by the Center for Investigative Reporting, they recently obtained a secret recording that shows oil executives laughing and sort of celebrating the fact that David Bernhardt is in positions of power and that they have so much access to the Trump administration. The recording comes from 2017 at an Independent Petroleum Association of America meeting in Southern California, where these officials or these executives, more than 100 executives, are telling their audience that Bernhardt's new role means that their priorities would be heard at the highest levels of the department. And so some of these executives go on to basically brag about how much access, how often they're able to meet with the EPA heads and the Interior Department heads. And the more you dig into this guy, Bernhardt, the more you look into him, you see that the New York Times also reported that he has fought the release of a report on the risks of pesticides that pose dangers to the endangered species. Also, that his firm, the law firm that he worked for, has given nearly $1 million to the members of the Senate who are going to be voting on his confirmation. So this dude is just completely dirty. You know, he's covered in oil. He's part of the oligarchy, and he's from the swamp. He's a really good example of a swamp creature who's working with big oil, collaborating to bend environmental rules. And of course, you know, for me, I'm not really one who's a fan of state regulation in the first place, but it's quite clear that these types of people do not give a damn about you, the environment, the animals, the future of the planet, or anything other than making their own money and helping out their buddies. And that's why I call it out, not because I want the state to get involved or because I even think that the things that they're doing necessarily are, you know, that the state rules maybe shouldn't have been there in the first place, right? But overall, this David Bernhardt is so closely tied to the oligarchy. And if you've ever watched How Big Oil, How Big Oil Conquered the World, or Why Big Oil Conquered the World by James Corbett, then you understand how powerful and influential the oligarchy is, the petrochemical companies that are also tied to Monsanto and also tied to other industries, and how important it is to expose them and to move away from those industries. Because this is not about representing the people, this is not about representing uh, anything positive that's going to help overall. It's about just serving their own interests. So, yeah, now you guys know Big Oil is in the White House. ICE and local police are collaborating to survey and monitor Americans, not just illegal immigrants. The U.S. is still bombing people in other countries that you've never been to and never heard of, and innocent people are dying. Geoengineering is getting closer and closer to being a reality every single day. And I'm just sitting here trying to wake people up to it and spread the information. So if you guys enjoyed this video, please do like, follow, subscribe, share. Shares always help, guys. Please do help us break through the algorithms by sharing this on your Facebook, on your Twitter, on whatever social media you use. Seriously, I can't emphasize that enough. The sharing really helps. And if you want to help even further, you can subscribe monthly to our Patreon at patreon.com/Derrick Broze. And I think that's it for now. Until next time, remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free. Peace.